How's it going, guys? Today I'm going to be teaching you some mini ramp tricks. Unless you already know them, then I won't be teaching you them. But yeah, I'm going to teach you 10 mini ramp tricks. These are very basic, like pretty much as basic as you can get. You guys know me, I'm not like an amazing mini ramp skater. In fact, I feel like I'm pretty beginner at it, which is kind of why I'm making this video, because I got some of these down recently. So I remember like the learning process, and I was hoping I could translate it for you guys in case you needed some help. So yeah, let's get into this. Okay, so this list does not include dropping in. I'm kind of assuming you already know how to do that. If you don't, there's like a million YouTube videos of learning how to do that, teaching how to do that. I recommend checking those out and lean forward a lot. That's my tip. But yeah, the first trick is a rock to fakie. You guys probably could have guessed that, but I think this is like the first trick you should probably try to learn on a mini ramp, because there's really not much to it other than getting your wheels and truck over the coping and then lifting up on the tail a little bit. I'll show you. It's a very simple trick, but it's a little scary the first time you try it, because everyone the first time they try it is scared of hanging out their wheels right here on the way down, and then they just fall on their back or something, and that's not fun. But it most likely won't happen, especially if you have a quarter pipe that's pretty mellow. Even if you don't lift the tail up that much, you can kind of just roll in. But I don't recommend doing that. I recommend first just pumping up and down to fakie without even touching the coping. And then once you get the hang of that, I recommend just doing this, getting the wheels barely over, and then just lifting up the tail a little bit and going back down fakie. But the best looking way to do it is to try to get the middle of the board right here, and you actually rock the board onto the deck, lift up and go back down fakie. That's why it's called a rock to fakie. Yeah, this one's really not hard. Just kind of build up to it if you're scared. Start with not touching the coping, then barely get the wheels over the coping, and then get the board on it and rock it, you know? And if going back in fakie is really freaking you out, then I recommend trying a rock and roll first. Because for some people, it's easier. I think it was for me. It was definitely less scary for me. But basically, you do a rock to fakie, except you don't go fakie. Once you're on right here, you just do a kick turn, and you roll away. So if you know how to do a kick turn, you already know how to rock and roll. All you have to do is get the wheels over and then do a kick turn. Super simple. It's a little more technical, I guess, than a rock to fakie, but it is less scary in my opinion, because you're not going backwards. And if you hang up doing a rock and roll, you're just gonna like run it out, whereas to fakie, if you hang up, you could fall backwards. But yeah, this trick is also super simple. Just commit to it, do a kick turn, practice your kick turns if you don't have kick turns. All right, the next one's a little more technical, but not too much. You basically just have to know how to do a fakie revert, if that's what you call it. Basically a fakie kick turn, but I call it a fakie revert rock to fakie. And it's when you go like this and do a rock to fakie. So have the rock to fakie down, obviously, and then all you do is throw in a fakie kick turn. You want to start the kick turn about a foot maybe below the coping. That's kind of where I aim it. And then you do a rock to fakie. That's also super simple. So basically, if you learn rock to fakies or rock and rolls, you learn like 3 or 4 tricks in that, kinda. There's a lot of different tricks inside tricks. That's the cool thing about skateboarding. It like unlocks new things as soon as you learn one thing. But yeah, that one's not too hard. And once again, if that one's scary for you, then I recommend trying the next trick, which is a fakie revert rock and roll. So it's the rock and roll, what you just did, except you do a fakie revert before it. And once again, you're not going in backwards, and your momentum is already carrying you to do like the full 360. So basically you just do a fakie 360 revert and let your wheels go over the coping a little bit. Super simple. And you just kick turn in. And a good way to warm up for this, although it might be a little freakier for some people, is you just don't touch the coping and you just do a fakie 360 revert. I personally think that's harder. Like, it's a little weirder to keep balance, because when you get to the top of the coping on the rock and roll thing, you have a second to kind of like get your weight adjusted right, and then you can come back in. With this, you don't. So either way, just practice it. I'm sure you'll get it. It's not too hard. Okay, this next one is kind of weird because it is so insanely simple, but it is a little awkward to try the first time. But once you try it, you're like, oh, I get it. Okay. But it's a switch rock to fakie. So really, switch rock to regular. The only thing you need to know how to do for this trick is be comfortable like riding switch, you know, like after you do rock to fakie, you're riding switch, and then just be comfortable lifting on the nose. So you'll be riding switch, and then right before your wheels get to the coping, lift up on the nose, just like you would for a rock to fakie regular, except it's with the nose. And then you just rock, and then you lift up on the nose again. So if you're not comfortable like using the nose for a trick, this is a really good place to learn how to do that. There's really not much to it. It is a little weird the first time you try it though, but I recommend just kind of like pumping switch, and then you'll get the courage one try to like just get the wheels over, and then you'll lift up on the nose, and that's it. That's all you have to do. And once again, if the transition is super mellow, sometimes if you're just leaning forward enough, you can just roll right over the coping. But once again, I don't recommend doing that, because if you learn it that way and you go to something a little steeper, that's a great way to hang up. There's a dog. Okay, so the next trick is something I relearned recently, and it's probably my favorite feeling trick on a mini ramp right now. It's a fakie disaster. I think that's what you call it. That's what I call it. It's a lot like the switch rock, except you're not lifting up on the nose. In fact, you are like pushing the tail of the board into the coping, like nudging the wheels against it. And what that does is it will pop the board into the air, then you get into rock, and then you do the switch rock that you learned last trick. So seeing people do this trick, you might think that they're doing like a fakie ollie. That's really not how I look at it, although I'm not like the best fakie disaster person, but that's not really how I look at it. I look at it more as shoving my back wheels into the coping and hopping when I do that, because when you shove it into the coping, it will naturally make the board go like that. Like if you go like this, see how it makes the wheels go up? Same motion, except you're doing a little hop with it, and then you just get in the switch rock and you do the switch rock to regular. It's kind of a weird motion at first. I think the hardest part for me was knowing the right amount of speed, because if you're going too fast, you can actually overshoot it. And I actually one time got into a nose blunt. Don't think about that, because it's gonna freak you out. But yeah, I was going way too fast and I got into a nose blunt, and then I ran away. But also you don't wanna go too slow, because then you're like not even gonna make it up on the deck. So just a medium speed. Once you get in it once, you'll understand like the speed that you need. But yeah, that's a really, really fun trick, and it's a instead of doing like a tail stall or a switch rock to go back into the transition, that like adds a little bit of flair to your run. So yeah, learn it. It's super fun. And speaking of tail stalls, that's the next one. And this one was a little hard for me to learn. I learned it years ago, but I still remember the struggle that I had with it. And for me, the biggest struggle was the speed and the timing. I can never figure out when to step down on the tail. But basically, you don't want to do it too early, because that's what I kept on doing. I always tried to do a tail stall, and I would end up stalling like right here, and that kind of makes you go like that, and it's scary. So what I did is I took my time, and as soon as I feel the wheels touch the coping, that's when I started to lean on the tail. And if you know how to drop in, which if you're learning these tricks, you probably should know how to drop in, it is the exact same feeling as dropping in. Like the weight on the tail and everything when you're standing up on the deck, exact same feeling. With a tail stall, you can kind of like halfway do it, like this. You don't have to fully get on the deck, but eventually you will learn how to just put all your weight on the tail. But I remember for the longest time, I just kind of did that over and over again. But yeah, the timing is probably the hardest part. All you have to do is step on the tail with all your weight, but do it right as the wheels are like touching the coping, and then drop in. That's it. That's all you have to do for a tail stall. You'll get better at it the more you try it. But yeah, this is like a good fundamental trick. Okay, now we are getting into some coping tricks, and I'm starting with the Feeble. A lot of people probably learn the axle stall first, but I'm starting with the Feeble because for me, it was way easier than learning axle stalls actually. So a Feeble is when the back truck is on the coping and the front truck is not on the coping. It's like on the deck. So all you do for this, at least all I did, was I focused on just getting my back truck on the coping, and I started to do like a kick turn, but for me, naturally, my front wheels would just land on the deck. It wasn't too natural to get my front wheels on the coping for an axle stall. So I just kind of like relaxed once I was in the Feeble. And I think one of my biggest tips for this trick is you want to try to pinch the back wheel against the coping with your heel. That really gets you to stand up on the Feeble, and it also makes coming in way easier. I see a lot of people like lean on their toes when they're in a Feeble, and that doesn't give you like the right stability. You want to like pinch the heel on the wheel against the coping. That was like Dr. Seuss. And for this and the axle stall that I'll talk about in a second, I imagine standing up on the deck, like the deck of the mini ramp. I imagine just standing straight up because another issue I had is I leaned into the mini ramp too much. Although you can still do a Feeble leaning into the mini ramp. With an axle stall, it's a little weirder. So yeah, that's my biggest tip. Basically the steps to it are kick turn, get the truck on the coping, lean on your heel and stand up, and then you just kick turn back in. Practice it, it's not too hard. And then from there, I learned how to do an axle stall. So axle stall, the way I learned it is I imagined a Feeble and then I imagined rotating more. That's all I did. So if you guys are like me and you can do a Feeble, all you need to do is get up, don't put the front wheels down, turn a little more, stand up on the deck, make sure your front trucks are touching the coping, and then you just turn in. It's so hard to stand here. Something that really helps me with axle stalls is I tried to cross lock the trucks. When I learned it, I always just was in the mini ramp like this, and that's not really correct because you're not standing up on the deck. So I learned how to like pinch the heel like I did with the Feeble. So this wheel is locked in like heel side, and then with the front truck, I try to lock it in toe side. So you're like zigzag like this. For me, that gave me a lot of stability. Something I hated is when I was on the toes, like both wheels were toe side. That way you're like standing completely on the deck, but you have like zero stability. And I don't think it looks as cool. Like I think if you're kind of cross locked in, it makes you look like you're locked into an axle stall. But my biggest tip for that is if you know how to feeble, just turn a little more and force your front truck to touch the coping. And you can kind of work up to it. You can kind of like lean into the mini ramp and just touch both trucks real quick. And then from there, work your way up and just start standing up on the deck of the mini ramp. The last trick that I'm gonna teach you guys is a mixture of both of the tricks you guys just saw. It's just a feeble to axle. And the reason I'm putting it in is because it's not as easy as it seems. And not only that, if you learn how to feeble to axle, you'll completely understand the weight distribution to stand on the deck. So if you're kind of struggling with feebles and you're kind of struggling with axle stalls, this might sound weird, but I recommend you trying to learn a feeble to axle because it completely teaches you the weight distribution to stay up on the deck for a second. So the key to this trick is when you get in the feeble, you have to fully be standing up on the deck. Like you kind of have to chill there for a second. And then before you kick turn in, you want to just slightly kick turn and put your front truck on the coping and then you go back in. You can kind of do it like really quick at first, like doop, doop, doop. That was a good beat. And then the better you get at it, you can stand up there for longer and you can kind of lock into both of them. And actually, I think this trick looks really cool if you do it right. Like if you're watching someone do like a mini ramp run and they just like throw in a feeble then to an axle stall, you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Good job, Jim. His name's Jim. But yeah, this one really does teach you the correct like weight distribution for coping tricks. And when I got this mini ramp, I was actually like not doing axle stalls completely correct. And when I tried to do the feeble to axle, that's when I started understanding the proper weight. So hopefully that helps you guys as well. All right guys, so those were my 10 mini ramp tricks, like beginner mini ramp tricks that anyone can learn. Once again, I am no master of mini ramps. The reason I made this video in the first place is because I feel like I figured these out not that long ago that it's still like fresh in my brain to be able to teach them to you. This ramp is insanely fun, by the way. It is made by Keen Ramps. There's their logo. I'll put their link down below. It is seriously like the easiest mini ramp setup you can possibly set up. I don't build things and I was able to build this. It's like putting together furniture. It's amazing. But yeah, I hope this helped you out. If you guys enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell to never miss an upload. I also have a gaming channel that I upload 4 times a week on. You can click the card right there and you'll subscribe to it. That's it. That's all I have to say. I haven't done a kickflip today. I'm gonna do a kickflip right there. First try. That was a good kickflip. Welcome to the after clip. Tray flip, first try. Nope.